Hello everybody, my name is Emmy Wienhoven and I'll be presenting on behalf of Royal Dutch Kentalis. This is a presentation made by Sonja Jansma and myself. You'll hear me throughout this presentation, but Sonja will be available during the Q&A to answer any questions. So we both work for Royal Dutch Kentalis, and that is a service provider in the Netherlands. We offer education, care and diagnostics for people who are deaf and hard of hearing, are deaf-blind or have a developmental language disorder, and this can be with or without other disabilities such as autism. We have an international department, that's where I myself work, and that is the department where we share our knowledge internationally with partners during multi-annual programs or in short-term collaborations, and that is how we came to adapt this observation tool for sign language development to a Kenyan context together with a kitabu. Sonja works as a linguist in one of our schools for the deaf in the Netherlands. So this sign language observation tool originated in our preschool services and schools for deaf and hard of hearing learners, and was developed by Sonja Jansma and her colleagues. And it was a collaboration between both our care and our education departments. We offer education and care for children who are very young in an early intervention environment, and that means that there was a real need to track the development of sign language in these young children between the ages of 0 and 4. And the observation tool is based on literature and on the framework of sign language of the Netherlands education. There's also some international research, and there's observation tools that have been adapted. So there's items that have been adapted for sign language of the Netherlands specifically. And as I said, it's used to monitor the early sign language development of these young children. And the tool is designed to be filled in by people with expert knowledge of sign language of the Netherlands. And not just users of sign language of the Netherlands, but also you need additional information and extensive knowledge of linguistic features. And that means that it can be filled in by sign linguists, speech and language therapists with extensive sign language of the Netherlands knowledge, and sign language teachers with extensive linguistic knowledge. And that means that it's not per se a tool that would be used by teachers or by parents. It gives a very detailed overview of the development of these children's sign language acquisition, but it does mean that it takes some time and some expertise to be able to fill it in. There's a limitation in the fact that this is not a standardized observation tool. We can't say that, or it can't be used to say, for example, that children are a year behind in their sign language development, because for that you would need a large population, and there's just simply not that many deaf and hard of hearing children with signing deaf parents. So there's not a lot of children who get that early language input and are and don't have a language delay as such. So that means that we don't necessarily know what normal language development or age-appropriate language development for deaf and hard of hearing children is so specifically that we can standardize that. So this observation list can be used to monitor where children are at, how they're going, whether there are specific areas where they're not developing as fast maybe as they develop in other areas, but it can't be said anything about how they're developing in relationship to peers. So what is the objective of this observation tools, or in other words, what is it that we measure? So we want to gather detailed information on the specific sign language skills of deaf and hard of hearing learners. And these sign language skills have been divided up into 3 categories, and the first one being communicative prerequisites. And that is skills that children need prior to learning language. For example, being able to divide their attention or expressing likes and dislikes when they don't want something or when they do want something. The second category is receptive skills. So their understanding of the language used around them. So are they responding when someone uses attention strategies? Do they understand some form of quantity when signs for quantity are being used? Do they understand commands? And which commands do they use? Do they understand simple or more complex language used to them? Now the third one is their production skills. So their ability to sign themselves. And these as well start off with simple one sign utterances and grow in complexity. And the person filling out this observation list can mark whether the child masters these or not yet, or if it's emergent, or if it's not seen. So there's 4 categories for that. Now, we know what we want to measure, but why do we want to measure this? So what intent, what is our purpose when we're filling out these observation lists? As I said before, they're quite detailed, so there is time and effort involved. It's not something that you do in between things. It's something that you really have to sit down for and take the time to do well. So why are we making this investment? Well, first of all, because we want to closely monitor the process of the progress that children are making in their language development. And this is the reason why we use it in the Netherlands. We want to see how kids are doing, how they're progressing, and how their development is going in general. The second reason why you might want to do this is one of the reasons why we collaborated with Adaptation to do this, because they wanted to project monitor, and this observation list can contribute to that. So the way that would happen is that you would score children on whether they are showing certain items, and if they're mastering it or are they developing it. And you could do a pre and a post, or you can do continuous measuring over a period of time. And you can compare the results, or the average results, or the amount of progress that you're seeing in one school versus maybe a school where you have not done an intervention. And then you can see how your intervention is actually influencing the sign language development skills of the learners in these schools. Now, we're saying that they contribute to project monitoring because there's a lot of factors involved that determine whether your project is a success or whether it's not a success. And there's also a lot of factors involved in sign language development of children. For example, are there language models available? Is there time? How old are these kids? How involved are parents? There's so many factors that maybe the intervention that you're putting into place is one piece of the puzzle, but it's definitely not the whole picture. So you want to be able to really show this as part of your project monitoring and as a contribution rather than as it in full. And the third point is to identify additional areas of intervention. So this can be on a child level. So when you see that a child is developing on many items or in many areas, but not so much on a few, then that could be a specific area for intervention. But it could also spark a new project or an adaptation of your current project, because it could highlight aspects that you thought you were influencing with your intervention, and it shows that it actually is not, or not in the way that you were expecting. So you can tweak your project, you can learn from it, and you can create new interventions or new projects. Now, what it doesn't do, and this is really important, it's not a tool that can be used to assess children. So or not a tool to assess schools. It is just to evaluate where we are and where these children are and where these schools are. We can't talk about a bad performing child based on this tool or a bad performing school. It's not something that we can use to grade children, because that's not how the tool is designed. And as we said in the beginning, it is not a standardized tool either. So this is really just monitoring and evaluating and keeping track. And these are very different than marking, assessing, grading children. And I think it's really important that we separate these things, because as I said, there's so many factors involved that we really don't want to conflict them. I already said that we adapted the tool for use with Kenyan Sign Language, and this was the collaboration that we did with Ikitabu. They came to us because they wanted to monitor their project impact. And this is where we talked through what it was that we actually could measure, that we wanted to measure, and whether there was some collaboration possibilities between Kentalis and Ikitabu. And this tool really jumped out as a fantastic opportunity to monitor how kids are doing in Kenyan schools where Ikitabu is providing support through their sign language books and through Studio KSL. So, as I already said, the tool was originally in Dutch for sign language of the Netherlands, so there was a couple steps that needed to be taken. It was a collaborative adaptation that involved a translation to English and a selection of the relevant items, and also changing the language-specific items to be KSL-specific, because we wanted something that wasn't necessarily based on sign language of the Netherlands. So, and as we will pilot this tool, we might come to some new insights where certain items might become more or less relevant, or we may need to add or abstract some items. But that is part of that adaptation process. The other adaptation that we did is that this observation list is no longer age specific. In the Netherlands, this tool runs from 0 to 12 months, from 12 to 24, 24 to 36, and 36 to 48 months. And the major adaptation that we did is because kids don't get that sign language access when they're 0 years old or they're 2 months old. They get sign language access mostly when they enter school. So the 0 in 0 to 12 months is no longer age, it's a contact and access to sign language. So the moment that they start having an opportunity to actually acquire sign language. And this resulted in an extensive tool that consists of 12 communicative prerequisites, the communicative conditions, 21 understanding items, so that is the receptive items, and 78 production items that kids can be scored on. But as you already see in the picture, the items are not, so the first list from 0 to 12 months doesn't contain 78 items. So there's some overlap between the 0 to 12 months and the 12 to 24, for example. But we made a very educated guess based on the tools that we used in the Netherlands on what children would be able to acquire in that first year of sign language acquisition, and items that they might acquire in the first 2 years of sign language acquisition. So that's where the overlap is. So it's only the last tool that goes up to 78, but doesn't actually have those first items, for example, on the production category. So this tool is developed in the Netherlands, adapted for Kenyan Sign Language, and is now ready for use in project monitoring and for observing Kenyan children. And Georgine will talk a little bit more about that in a second, because she's been using the tool, and she'll talk us through how the implementation is going, and what we're piloting and what her experiences are. So if you have any other questions, of course we have a Q&A after, but feel free to have a look at our website, kentalis.com, or email me directly. And if you have questions for Sonia, I'll redirect them to her. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the Q&A.